The back-to-back Stanley Cup champions looked like a massive threat to three-peat up until 2 weeks ago. The Alexander Barkov injury has completely derailed the potential of the Florida Panthers. But can the depth on this team still get them back to the promised land? This is the 2025-26 Deep Dive on the Florida Panthers. Hello and welcome to the final episode of my preseason power rankings, my deep dive series. It's been an incredible adventure. So first of all, thank you for joining me along this ride. If you have been since the beginning, if you haven't been, well, there's 31 more of these that you can go watch. And if you want to hear about a specific team, I have a video on them out here. Now the Florida Panthers one is interesting because I was pretty confident they were going to be number one before I started making my rankings, and I was very confident in that pretty much up until like a week ago when Alexander Barkov was ruled out for the entire season because of an injury that happened in practice. Now at that point, my rankings were already finalized and everything in terms of like the group rankings was done, so I didn't want to have to completely rework it for like 4 teams that I had left. So if I were to redo it, the Panthers would likely not be number one right now. It's just not like that wouldn't be the case. Also, their team rankings wouldn't be the same. Like there, you'll see where they rank kind of in offense and special teams, and neither of those would be as high as they are. But I just figured that at this point there was no point in going back and like completely changing everything. Alexander Barkov will not be on the forward page. I'm not going to talk about him there. Obviously, it's a massive loss to this team. It's their number one center. I will talk about kind of the repercussions of that. But in terms of like the rankings, yeah, they're going to be a little bit off because of this. But like I was too late in the series to like everybody else's rankings wouldn't line up basically, or at least a lot of the team's rankings wouldn't line up if I would have went and reworked it. So that's just the reality of where we're at right now. So I apologize for that. But the Florida Panthers are number one in theory right now, and they are back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. So like it's fair enough to have them at one regardless. But there you go. That's kind of the intro there. Again, like there's not a whole lot for me to rip on the Florida Panthers for because like the Barkov injury isn't their fault. The Kachuk injury isn't their fault. There's nothing they really could have done to prevent each of those. There's not much they could have done to fix those problems this summer because they didn't really have the money to. They locked everybody else up. We can talk about the contracts and stuff and how some of them are a bit longer than I would have liked. But that's all semantics, right? This team just won 2 Stanley Cups. Like, I don't think they really care. Like, that's the end point. This is going to be a pretty easy video to fly through regardless of that. Again, we look at the rankings. First in offense, that obviously wouldn't be the case. Now, first in special teams probably wouldn't be the case either. But third in defense, sixth in goaltending, first in coaching culture, those ones are pretty locked in. Now, the defense one is interesting because I don't know if there's a clear number one in the league, so you can kind of move people up and down depending on where you want that to go. But a lot of that ranking is just me believing in like the Paul Maurice system, being able to elevate players like they did last year. They bring in Nate Schmidt last year, and he turns into a very important defenseman for them. They bring in Jeff Petrie this year. I expect Jeff Petrie to have a much better season than he has the last couple of years because it's just kind of how the Panthers seem to operate. Oliver Ekman-Larsson's another good example of that, where they brought him in and he turned into a decent defenseman, then he left. It's just a cycle of bringing guys that the rest of the league doesn't really value and turning them into solid assets. So I don't think that's going to change much there, and the rest of the blue line is pretty much intact. Obviously, offensively, they really didn't bring in anybody. It was basically just re-signing everybody. They kept everybody on the offense, and the special teams, same thing. Goaltending is interesting. Obviously, it's Sergei Bobrovsky's last season. They don't have a backup plan now. Obviously, with Spencer Knight being moved out, so it'll be interesting to see kind of how they maneuver that. I'd expect him to just re-sign for a lower cap hit than what he's making currently, but still, up until that actually happens, he is obviously still a free agent in coaching culture. I think they're the best in the league in that category, and we'll jump into that right now. I mean, Bill Zito, everything he touches seems to turn to gold the last couple of years. Again, like I don't love some of the contracts he handed out this summer. I think that they're a bit long. The Brad Marchand contract's long. The Mikula contract is very long. But like they have everybody locked up basically. They have like most of this team locked up to like 2030. Like it's pretty incredible. And it is an older roster, right? Like it is aging, but it's locked up for another 4 years at least. Really, besides Bobrovsky, and like that on its own is very good news for them. Obviously, you hope that Barkov can come back from this, next year and be healthy. You hope that Matthew Tkachuk comes back and is fully healthy and ready to go. Paul Maurice, on the other hand, I think has also proven that he's arguably the best coach in the NHL the last 3 years. Obviously, 3 straight Stanley Cup appearances will do that to you, but just the fact that like the comparison from where he was in Winnipeg to where he is now, where he just he clearly didn't have the team that was built for him in Winnipeg, right? Like he was there for quite a while, but they didn't have the players to fit how he wanted to play. And so I think now in Florida, obviously this team is exactly how he wants to play, and it's worked out fantastically for him, which is why I still have some hope that the Panthers will be able to kind of navigate this without Barkov era. But it's interesting. We're going to talk about that in a second. And what one of my big concerns is for that. In terms of championship contender, I did move them down to fridge contender. They obviously were at contender with an A+. When I originally did this, I did slide them down to fringe contender with an A- just because I do think the Barkov injury is pretty substantial, and I think that their center depth will be kind of called into the question this year. But overall, I mean, it's been a team that hasn't really cared about the regular season the last couple of years, and I think they're going to have to now, which is where most of the struggle is going to come. It's a team that was 21st in goals for last year. Right now, they did generate quite a bit of goals. They were 9th in expected goals for. Evolving Hockey has them both the same. Defensively, 4th, 2nd in expected goals against. Again, similar to what Evolving Hockey seems to have them at. 10th in goal share, 2nd in expected goal share. You'd expect that to go up, but again, not having Matthew Tkachuk for a good portion of the season, not having Alexander Barkov for the entire season may hurt that. Right now, obviously, you have Brad Marchand for the whole year. You do have Seth Jones for the whole year. But unless they go get somebody in the market, which they could do, right? They could go get a pending free agent and just use that Barkov money. But it's going to be hard to navigate that if they can't find a solution there, because those are big losses to the team. So I don't know how much better their numbers are going to be, despite the fact that their goals for number seems to indicate that like some positive regression could happen there. Defensively, I think this team's still going to be really good. 26th in finishing last year. I don't know if I expect that to jump up a ton. In the regular season, at least, this is definitely a team that didn't care about the regular season for a good portion of the season last year, and I think they will this year, right? Because I think that the Atlantic now is kind of wide open, right? You have Toronto and Tampa Bay, who were both in my top 10 area, who could easily push the Panthers now for the top spot in this division. But then you have Ottawa, who I really like. You have Montreal, who I think is up and coming. I don't know if anybody below that will be really pushing the Panthers, but there is some competition here, right? And that's 4 teams that I listed right there, and the most that can come out of the Atlantic is 5. Now, I'm not saying the Panthers are going to completely fall off the map. Obviously, I have them number 1, but the injury to Barkov is substantial enough that it does raise a little bit of concern for me, and that's kind of going to be the narrative thread throughout this entire video, really. And we jump to the center position, or the forward position here, and the centers is kind of the area that I want to talk about here, because they just signed Sam Bennett to the big extension. But here's the thing, right? And this is what was talked about when the contract was signed, right? Smart people were talking about this when the contract was signed, that Sam Bennett was great in the playoffs, and he was great in the playoffs the year before. The problem is Sam Bennett is not a good regular season player because he just takes nights off. He's not somebody, and you don't want him to have to play hard for 82 games because he's just going to run out of steam. That's what happens with power forward type players like this, especially centers who need to play the full length of the ice. Now that Barkov is gone, the onus of pressure for Sam Bennett to be a quote-unquote everyday player heightens greatly, right? And behind that, you have Anton Lundell, who I think could take a big step this year. I expect big things from him. But then you have Adam Boqvist and Thomas Nosek. It's not a deep center core suddenly, right? You lose your number 1 guy, and suddenly it's like Sam Bennett shouldn't be a number 1 because he can't play 82 games as a number 1 center. Anton Lundell's unproven for the most part in a top 6 role. Now, I think that there's a ton of potential there, but he hasn't had to do it, right? Like, especially in the last 2 years. So there's pressure there, and then you have Adam Boqvist and Thomas Nosek, who are 4th line centers. So suddenly now the center position here in Florida gets called into question a lot, because the Sam Bennett contract, I think the only team that I would have been okay with signing him to the deal that he was signed to was the Florida Panthers, because they were able to get the most out of him, and they were the only team that could offer him the opportunity to basically take the regular season off. He can't do that now. Like, all of a sudden now, he needs to be the guy on this team, or Anton Lundell needs to step up and be the guy on this team. And I just, that's not, like, that's a bigger issue than people are kind of making it out to be, because this team just went to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. Everybody's like, oh, well, they're going to be fine, whatever. They got Sam Bennett locked up. But it's like, the whole point of the Sam Bennett deal is that in Florida, he wouldn't have to, like, play 100% the entire regular season and wear himself out, because he's a power forward, over, getting entry, kind of in his prime and exiting his prime, signed to a long-term deal. Those deals do not age well if the power forward needs to play hard every single game. Like, they just get worn out. It's happened. Like, you can go through the entire history of power forwards in the NHL, and that's just the way it goes. But in Florida, this is a team that didn't really care about the regular season, right? Like, they could literally have just sat him for games, and, like, he could have just not played back-to-backs at some point. So, like, it just... But now you just don't have that option because your number one center is gone. And it's like, holy shit, if Sam Bennett's not playing one night, like, the center core is brutal. So that's a big deal to me, right? The rest of the team, obviously the wings are fine. Carter Verhaeghe, I really like. Evan Rodriguez has kind of fell off a little bit, but he's still, very useful. I think that if the Panthers are going to move a contract out, Evan Rodriguez kind of feels like the guy to go, because Eetu Luostarinen can step up. Mackenzie Samoskevich is there as well, who I really like, and is, obviously a really young up-and-coming player, had a great playoffs. Sam Reinhart is going to be another interesting one to watch now, because now Sam Reinhart kind of has to do it by himself, right? Like, he needs to be the driver of the line, whereas before he had Alexander Barkov, who I've been saying for years is massively underrated as an offensive center, because everybody talked about his defense, which wasn't super elite until like a couple years ago. He was just really good at winning faceoffs, and he got a lot of turnovers, and people love that. But like, his defensive, like, actual, like, stoppage ability wasn't elite until like 3 years ago. That's a whole nother argument. I love Alexander Barkov. This isn't a shot at him, but the point is that Alexander Barkov's, like, value came from being an offensive creator for most of his career, and people just kind of associated that with defensive. There's a whole bunch of psychological things we can get into with that. The point is that I think that he was a big reason why Sam Reinhart had, like, the breakout he did the second he left Buffalo. And it's going to be interesting to see if Sam Reinhart can carry a line by himself, right? Because Carter Verhaeghe is really good, and whoever other winger you want to put with him is going to be solid, but, like, it's not Alexander Barkov. And I'm just curious to see if he can carry that load. Matthew Tkachuk's obviously gone until, like, December, January. I've heard some people say he won't be back till the Olympics. We'll see. But again, that's another big loss here too. Brad Marchand, I think, can step up into the second line until that time. I think his numbers are still good enough to do that. Again, I think it's still going to be a very good team. But I think the loss of Alexander Barkov is, like, massive. Like, it's huge, and I don't think there's, like, an argument to that. That's not a hot take, but I really do think that it's a massive deal, and I think it's a bigger deal than people are even making it out to be, because I don't love Sam Bennett as my number one center. We'll get into it. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk's the first player to talk about here. Obviously, they're going to be missing him for a good portion of the season. At least the first half of the season. Defensively, he did step up his game last year. He had a better season after just an abysmal 23-24. But this is somebody who, like, has been at the top of... I think he still has the best goals above replacement season of all time since the stat was trashed. Like, you're really talking about a player here that, when he's fully healthy and engaged and in the lineup, he is one of the best wingers in the NHL. And it's just a matter of, like, getting him healthy, really, right? Like, this is now... going to be almost a full year of him being, by the time he's back, like a full year of him having some sort of lingering injury. And it's because of the Barkov injury now. I think there's a bit of panic in Florida in terms of what they expect for this season and kind of what their outlook is, because, like, they're going to be missing their two best forwards until at least December, right? Like, that's a 2-month span at the very least that you're not going to have those guys. And then, Tkachuk's going to come back, but Barkov's still not there. So it's just, I don't have any concern about Tkachuk when he comes back. I think that, his, in the playoffs, he had moments where he looked really good. I don't think he had a fantastic run there. Like, he was still clearly dealing with an injury. But I think, when he comes back, the pressure's going to be kind of on him to be, like, 100% right away, ready to go. And that's just a lot to ask for from a player like that. So I do think that there's some concern there that Tkachuk might not come back to be his full self, and the Panthers are going to kind of need him to be, because like they the the team is going to be in a situation very likely where they're going to need wins, like in abundance in that kind of chunk of the season. And maybe, Paul Maurice just has them lining up and they'll win. They'll be first place in the Atlantic before anybody comes back. And then everybody's worried that this team could win a third straight Stanley Cup with none of their guys healthy. But if the Panthers struggle in the first 2 months of the season, the pressure on Matthew Tkachuk to come back early and come back like fully ready and engaged to play is going to heighten. And that, I don't think, is going to be good for his long-term, first of all, health and just like long-term play, right? But obviously, I mean, Tkachuk's one of the best play drivers in the NHL. He's not a great finisher, but he generates chances at such a high level that like it doesn't really matter. Sets up a ton of primary assists. Great on the power play. Matthew Tkachuk's awesome when he's playing. There is a concern now that this could be like just a long-term thing for him, and at 26 years old, that's not good. But and again, like it's just that high-intensity play style. Is playing a lot of hockey and just playing at an intense pace, and that's one of the reasons why the Panthers were able to take the regular season off. They didn't really care, and now that all these injuries are piling up anyway, you kind of need to start caring, and that's gonna be tough when they're missing key players. But when healthy, Tkachuk is great. One of the best wingers in the NHL. Sam Reinhart, like I kind of said in the intro here, he's somebody that hasn't really had to drive play a ton offensively. Now he's good at it, right? Like, but he's not. His offensive production in terms of points indicate a higher level of play driving than what he's actually putting up, and it's not a shot at him. I mean, even like his totals themselves are pretty good, but I do think we're going to see a bit of a drop off from what Reinhart was last year in terms of his points, just because like he wasn't the primary play driver since he's been in Florida, and when he had to do that in Buffalo, his numbers weren't great. Now again, that was in Buffalo, so take that with a grain of salt, but there was a lot of drop off in his game, and I think that that's something that we could see here. Now defensively, Sam Reinhart still rocks. Obviously, he was right there in the Selke vote. He's going to be really good defensively, but again, like I don't know, with the full pressure of having to carry that line defensively now, I don't know if those numbers drop off either. There's a lot of dominoes that could fall there, but like on the surface, his defensive numbers have been really good. Obviously, I have concerns about both those numbers dropping now, because the defensive pressure is going to be higher, the offensive pressure is going to be higher. This is really going to be a sink or swim season for Sam Reinhart to prove that he really is like a true like number one winger in the league. I still have some doubts about that, but we'll see. I mean, like this is going to be the perfect year for him, like really, right? Because he's going to be fully given the opportunity to be the guy on this team for the first 2 months, and let's see if he can carry a Stanley Cup level team. Power play wise, he's still going to be really good. This team power play is still going to be pretty sick. Even without Barkov, like the talent that they have on it is still really good. Sam Bennett, right, is the question mark, right? And I talked about this a bit in the intro to the forwards, but the whole point of the Sam Bennett contract and why I liked it in Florida, like I said, was because he wouldn't have to be like engaged 82 games a season. Right, the whole Panthers team wasn't engaged for 82 games a season. Right, there was a lot of moments in that season last year where the team just was not locked in, and did not care. And as soon as they got to the playoffs, they were just a completely different team. Right, it was just basically like, let's get one of the 8 spots. It's very LA Kings from like the 2010s, where it was like we don't care where we finish in the standings, we just want to get in, and then we can just wreak havoc. Where like they were so confident that they could just beat anybody that it didn't really matter. This year is going to have to be a bit different, because I don't think they can coast through the regular season in the same way. I think that the Eastern playoff bubble is competitive enough that there's enough teams kind of like circling the wagons down there to make things interesting. And I don't think that the Atlantic sending 5 teams is a lock. Like I don't think that that's necessarily the way it's going to be, which is why I think Canadiens fans need to be worried there too. But that's another whole discussion, and Sens fans to a lesser extent, but. Like, the Rangers are going to be, competitive, I think, at least compared to where they were, right? You have the Hurricanes, Devils, and Capitals, who are all, playoff teams last year. And then you have, Toronto and Tampa Bay and Ottawa in your division and Montreal that made the playoffs, right? So it's tough for me to see a world where Sam Bennett being your everyday number one line center, playing a bunch, being fully locked in for 82 games, and then getting to the playoffs and having to do that to another level is going to lead to success. I don't see that happening. And I think it also hurts his long-term value as a player, right? I think in a weird way, right? In a weird way, and Panthers fans might not like this, but this very much feels like when the Warriors just lost everybody for that one season, and then tanked and got the first overall pick or whatever it was, or top 3 pick or whatever it was that one year. It kind of feels like to a lesser extent, that's just what the Panthers should do this year. It's just kind of you have everybody locked up already besides Bobrovsky. I don't think that they're going to make a big swing in the trade market. I think they're just going to kind of ride this out and see what happens and play it the same way that they would have anyway. I think that's the best move, because then you're not wearing out Bennett. You're not wearing out this old team that without Barkov, if he doesn't touch the playoffs, which it doesn't sound like he's going to, I don't see the Panthers coming out of the East anyway, right? Especially if they have to play harder through the regular season. I just don't see them being the Eastern Conference representative this year. Whereas, 3 weeks ago, I would have had no problem seeing that. In fact, they would have been my favorite. They were number 1 on my rankings. But I really think that the Panthers should just kind of keep doing what they were doing last year. And if the chips fall into a playoff spot, great. If not, I don't think they should really care. I think you should just be okay punting a season and preserving your longevity in a similar way to what Golden State did. Golden State won another championship after doing that. So I think that that's the best course of action for this team. I think doing something, trying to find a quick fix here to keep the window alive isn't really necessary, and isn't necessary for job security either, right? The Florida Panthers could finish dead last in the NHL this season, and Bill Zito and Paul Maurice are fine. They will not lose their job. There is zero pressure for them to win this season. Really, intrinsically, right? Obviously, extrinsically, the fans would love to continue the party and keep winning. But I really think that, veering away from what the plan was for this season, if everybody was healthy, is not the best course of action for this team. And that creates this weird world where you might see the Panthers just kind of struggle and miss the playoffs, right? I think that's a possibility. I wouldn't bet on it happening, but it is definitely a possibility now. And I'm curious to see kind of how they plan that, because the way I would do it is just kind of run the way that you would have anyway. If Barkov was healthy. But I'm worried if they run Sam Bennett as their number 1 center for the entire year, what kind of the outcome of that's going to be. That scares me a little bit. Carter Verhaeghe is somebody that has started to, hit a bit of a decline now. Last year wasn't nearly as good as the season was 2 years ago. His finishing cratered last season, but he's still, the last 2 years were good enough. His defense actually got, stabilized. Offensively, he was about the same. But, at 29 going into 30, signed for a crazy deal, $7 million for another 8 seasons. This is what I mean by just this being one of the weird contracts that Bill Zito handed out. I get you wanted to keep Carter Verhaeghe around, but it's just I think that the decline that he went on last year concerns me a little bit, and I'm interested to see how he can bounce back from that. Last year wasn't a great season for him, and heading into the start of a $7 million deal, it worries me slightly that things could this could turn out to be not a great contract for this team. Defensively, Carter Verhaeghe's never been a great defender. Offensively, he's still a really good play driver. His finishing last year obviously cratered. It could just be PDO. We'll see. Concerns me a little bit. Obviously, he's going into 30. It's kind of where players' careers start to kind of hit the decline. So we'll see if he can bounce back from that. But, he's going to be a big piece to this team if they're going to be competitive in the first, 2 months. I think Carter Verhaeghe needs to find that gear to be the player that he was, a couple years ago, where he was just this super underrated, great elite play driver, just real annoying guy who just consistently got high quality chances. Was great in transition. Like if he can be that again, that would be exceptional, at least for the first like 3 until Kachuk comes back. Basically, he just needs to kind of be that secondary option. I think for this team, I think he's the most likely to be the secondary guy on this team. I don't think Brad Marchand has enough runway to do that at this point in his career. Carter Verhaeghe seems like the guy that is most likely to step up into that role, to be kind of the second forward behind Sam Reinhart. But we'll see. I mean, like he's somebody that I'm definitely keeping an eye on to see how he works out, because he's the guy that I would pin as being the the number 2 forward on this team. Evan Rodriguez, kind of like I said in the intro, like he's somebody that has started to. We've seen kind of the slow decline of what Evan Rodriguez is. Now his underlying numbers are actually still pretty good. He still gets a ton of shots. His chance contributions are still pretty high, but it's a lot. His passing has fallen off a little bit. His cycle and forecheck offense is still really good. His rush offense has kind of fallen off a little bit. In terms of his retrievals and exits and zone entries, that's kind of where we've seen the biggest decline in his game from where he was a couple years ago, and that's kind of what's led to his overall numbers starting to peter off a little bit. And that's the concern here, right? Because now you need Evan Rodriguez to bounce back, because everybody needs to step up. And again, like I said, Evan Rodriguez is probably the most likely player to get moved if there's going to be a trade, and it could just be like very much a Vegas Golden Knights where we're just going to dump this guy for free and then use the money and other assets to acquire more talent. I don't necessarily think that he'd be like involved. He'd be like the centerpiece of a trade as they try to improve the roster. But I think that there's a world where Evan Rodriguez like does get moved off this team, and I don't know if it happens this year now, right? Like I think that the push to move Rodriguez has now diminished a little bit because of the injury to Barkov. I think that the pressure to reload the roster is now lower. But we'll see. I mean, it's a really interesting. It's really hard to kind of know what the Panthers are going to do now, because we haven't seen them have to deal with this, and they haven't done anything yet, right? It's been like a week. Like there's nothing to do at this moment. Nobody's really looking to make a trade. Everybody's pretty happy with what their teams look like at this point. So I'm curious to see kind of what the results and the impact of this are going to be. I think Evan Rodriguez is a fun player to watch throughout the season, because he's either going to get a fully elevated role into the top 6, or he is going to be traded. Like I think those are kind of the two options for where Rodriguez is going to be at this point. He was kind of the guy that everybody's throwing around in the offseason as a guy they could move to try to get everybody signed, and then they got everybody signed anyway, so it didn't really matter. But I'm curious to see what his outcome's going to be, because I think that his value on the team isn't super high, because Lucic and Samoskevich can kind of, one of those guys could jump in and kind of fill the void that was left by what Evan Rodriguez trade could make. So he is kind of the expendable player on this team with a higher contract. We'll see. I'm curious to see what the outcome is here. I think he'd still have value around the league, just because the Stanley Cup experience would entice some GM around the league, I'm sure. There's plenty of GMs that would buy on that, and I think he's still a useful player. But I think in terms of what the Panthers need, he's kind of expendable, because they have other players who could slot into the his role and fill it. I think good enough, especially compared to the price. Anton Lundell is the big question mark on this team. Now he had a really positive season last year. He really developed last year in that role, kind of playing that second middle 6 center spot. And he's going to be tested this year, right? Like he's going to be the full-time second line center, maybe the full-time first line center at some point. His numbers did all kind of improve last season, but I haven't seen enough from him to fully buy into that, like as a full-time option for the year. But in terms of like an X factor on this team, Anton Lundell is going to be the really deciding factor on whether this team is going to be for real or not this year, right? Because if Anton Lundell moves up into the top 6 full-time, playing against harder competition, I get it. He played top 6 in terms of like minutes last year, but like really, like his role was not of a true second line center. It was just Sam Bennett was taking time off, like we talked about earlier, right? So it's just but he really needs to take a leap this year. If he can do that, then if he can leap up into being like the team's number one center this year, they'll be fine, right? Because I think Bennett as your 2C is good enough to keep competitive in this division. But if Lindell doesn't take a big step up, if he improves but doesn't take a massive leap, it could be trouble for the Panthers center wise. Like I truly believe that like Anton Lindell is the key to like we can talk about the wingers all we want. I think Sam Reinhart's going to be fine. I think you have between Marchand, Verhaeghe, Rodriguez, Samoskevich, Lustorainen, whoever else you want to throw in there, like they'll be fine on the wing. The real question for this team is going to be at center, and Anton Lindell for me is the X factor to this team. Like he is the determining factor. And if I were to record this video 2 weeks ago, my praises for Anton Lindell would be completely different. I'd be like, this is a great option at your 3C. He's perfect for that role. He's like far better than a lot of third line centers in the NHL. Everything's great. But now it's like the narrative has changed over the last week, and that really is going to add pressure to what the Panthers need to do this season. And it's going to be an interesting kind of experiment here for the Panthers to see what their team is without Alexander Barkov. And it's something they've never had to experience throughout this run. I mean, they've been exceptionally healthy. That's been one of the things that has been, even last year, like they obviously took time off with the Kachuk injury, and Aaron Ekblad's been hurt quite a bit, but in like overall they haven't had any like derailing injuries. I think this is probably the closest thing to that. But again, like Anton Lindell is a big X factor for me. This is kind of the make or break player for this team, and everything else I don't think really matters all that much. Like if Anton Lindell can step up and be a second line center, even a first line center, Florida's gonna be fine. If he can't, it might be a tough year for the back Eastern Conference champions. Brad Marchand is still like a useful player. His penalty kill numbers are still exceptional. And his offensive production has taken a dip. He's not the play driver that he was, a couple years ago, but he's also 37 going on 38, which is insane that he got like a 6-year contract. It just blows my mind. Whatever. People take discounts in Florida. Like, okay, sure. Look at the Carter Verhaeghe deal. Look at the Brad Marchand deal, and tell me that to my face. Like, that's not true. But besides the point. And the Nico Mikkola contract's kind of brutal too. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Like people don't take discounts in Florida. Like, I'm sorry, Brad Marchand's contract is not a discount. He's signed far too long. But besides the point, this year he's still gonna be good. I don't think that making him a full-time second liner is gonna be the move. I think he's far better suited to be the third line wing on this team, like he was in the playoffs. He can kind of keep himself healthy, not have to strain himself too much, be a good complementary player. I think that his numbers is it's very Phil Kessel in Pittsburgh, where Phil Kessel was a very flawed player in his time in Pittsburgh, but the fact that he was buried in the lineup just kind of let them elevate his strengths a ton, and that's what the Brad Marchand deal is. He's a very flawed player at this point in his career, but burying him in the third line with players that match his style very well really helped elevate that group. So that makes it's a weird situation in that sense. I don't love him moving up into the top 6. He can if they need him to, but I think Brad Marchand's best usage would be in the bottom 6, and just kind of playing to his strengths, because the defense is horrid. His play driving isn't what it used to be. So that's kind of where I'd find the most value in what Brad Marchand is to this team. But I think he's still a really useful player. I don't love the contract, but I think that if he ends up playing full-time top 6 minutes, it might not be great for what they need. Attila Lustorainen I really like. Now he did take a dip last season in terms of his production in the regular season, but again, this team didn't really care about the regular season. He was really good in the playoffs. I think that if you can find a way to kind of recreate that third line that they had last year, then there'll be a ton of that'll be great. Like that's what they need to do, is find a way to make that third line happen. But Attila Lustorainen in the playoffs was fantastic. It was really a coming out party for him. his regular season numbers weren't great, which leads me to believe that his regular season numbers this year aren't going to be great. That's just kind of the way that goes. But again, like in the playoffs, he was awesome. Offensively, he's not anything special, but defensively is where his value is to this team. And in a bottom six that now is the team in general that now has lost one of their big defensive players. Luostarinen, I think his value is going to increase. Obviously, his penalty kill numbers are already very good. He'll have to elevate that as well. Everybody on that penalty kill, but defensively, I mean, he's been fantastic. That's definitely been his strength. But I'm interested to see if some of the success that he had in the playoffs, as well as Samoskevich, can carry over into the regular season. And speaking of Mackenzie Samoskevich, same thing, right? Like if he can just kind of, and he's young enough, especially Samoskevich, to make it work. But if he can just kind of carry over some of what we saw in the playoffs into the regular season and just be that player for the entire regular season, then he'll be great in the bottom six. Like it's a fantastic piece, right? Now, if it's very Luostarinen like where he's kind of coasting through the regular season and then all of a sudden the playoffs come around and he's able to turn it up, it's going to hurt what the team can do overall. This is the Panthers are such a weird team to grade because the roster, when you look at the grades, look lower than they probably should be. But it's because the grades are based on the regular season numbers. Regular season is a far bigger sample size. I could go over the whole regular season playoff debate for forever, but the fact is, the Panthers are noted as a team that just didn't care about the regular season the last couple of years, or especially the last 2 years. They're going to have to now, and so it's hard to grade these players in the same way that I was grading like the Ottawa Senators, just because it's the hard to, it's just like there's a different vibe to the team, right? Like the Ottawa Senators were trying to make the playoffs last season for the first time in forever, and the Florida Panthers are trying to win their second straight Stanley Cup. So just like it's hard to grade the players on the same scale because their priorities in the regular season were completely different. But again, like if Samoskevich can have the success that he did in the playoffs throughout the entire season, then he'll be great. The blue line for me is still really good too. I mean, Gustav Forsling is so underrated. He's a fantastic defender on both ends of the ice. Aaron Ekblad has definitely fallen off a bit. He's not nearly the same player that he was last year. It's another contract that I probably would have just not signed, but hey, whatever. Seth Jones really kind of revitalized his career. I mean, he revitalized his career in Chicago. Like, let's be honest here. Like, he was very much the same player that he was in Florida for their, cup run as he was in Chicago. Everybody clowns on the contract because the contract's awful. So but as a number 2, number 3 defenseman, like he's good in that role. Like that's where he should be slotted in. That's where he was slotted in Florida. And they found success. I think he might even have a better season than he did, last year, because he's going to be in Florida full time. And then obviously, Aaron Ekblad is this kind of, he's there. Again, don't love the contract. Nico Mikkola is a fun one. Super good as the defensive defenseman. I'll get into the contract when we talk about him, but I'm not a huge fan of it. And then, the Jeff Petrie contract, which I like. I think Jeff Petrie is a good buy low candidate here to, follow in the footsteps of, Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Nate Schmidt. He's that low buy, cheap league minimum type contract that they're going to have. He's going to be put in great situations, look really good, and then go sign a 3x3 deal somewhere else. Like that's just, it's a cycle that we see now for 3 years in a row. I think Jeff Petrie likely follows suit. The first person to talk about here is Gustav Forsling, who, oh my God, the breakout of Gustav Forsling 2 years ago was monumental. And it's what allowed them to let Brandon Montour just leave and not worry about it, because Gustav Forsling was good enough to step up and be a top pair defenseman. I mean, $5.8 million for 7 more years is an absolute steal for him. Now he is 28 going on 29, so that contract by the end won't age well, but they're going to get so much surplus value out of it at the top. I mean, he's a top pair defenseman making under $6 million for the next 8 years, for 8 seasons. It's incredible value. And it's one of the best value contracts in the NHL because, Ivan Provorov got $8 million this season, right? It's crazy to think that Gustav Forsling's going to make, more than he's making $2.2 million less than Ivan Provorov. He's making $2 million less than Gavrikov is, and Gustav Forsling is better than both those players by a pretty decent margin. Offensively, fantastic. Defensively, great. He peaked at both at the same time. It was really the 2 seasons ago where he had to step up and be that number 1 defenseman for this team. He was absolutely able to do that. His finishing as a defenseman is fantastic. His goal scoring is great. His primary assists are fantastic. He plays against elite competition. There's obviously like his penalty kill numbers aren't very good. He doesn't really play on the power play. Those are the things that kind of hold him back from being a true like high end defenseman for me, just because like he's not contributing to the special teams very much. In terms of 5-on-5 numbers, like he's a phenomenal number 1 defenseman, and for the value that they got for him, that contract surplus is just like it all compounds into him being just insanely valuable to this team. And it allows them to go get somebody like a Seth Jones, right? Where it's like Seth Jones is overpaid by like $2 million, but Gustav Forsling's underpaid by like $3 million, right? Like he's a $9 million. If you were to sign a deal today, if Gustav Forsling was in free agency today, he's signing for 9+, right? Like that's like he's signing a 7-year deal, like so the same length for like $3.2 million more. Like it's an insane value that they have on this contract. And if not more than that, right? Because the 2 Stanley Cup championships probably boost that value up too, right? Somebody's probably throwing 10 at him. So it's just like, it's insane value for what he is. He's absolutely a top pair defenseman. Really, I mean, he replaced what Aaron Ekblad was, the number 1 guy. He replaced Brandon Montour, what he was, is the almost number 1 guy. Gustav Forsling has been, I think, the best of those 3, at least like during this window. And I don't see that stopping anytime soon. I mean, he peaked 2 years ago. He stayed at the exact same level last year. I don't expect it to change much. His blue line got better than it was at the start of last season. So I don't expect much to change there. Like I talked about Seth Jones, man. I mean, like the special teams is really good, right? He's kind of the opposite of what Forsling is, really, whereas the special teams is really the strength of his game. But as an offensive creator, he's fine. I mean, as the near number 3 guy, he brings value there. Defensively brings there's a lot to be desired in terms of what Seth Jones is. But as the number 3 guy on this team, like he's good. That's the role that he should be playing. That was my argument in Columbus forever. And the same thing with Ivan Provorov, right? It's like literally the same type of thing, where he isn't a number 1. And he isn't really number 2. But like, if he's your second pair defenseman, playing kind of sheltered minutes, give him a partner that fits his style, like he's really useful. And he was for the Panthers, right? And in Chicago, like I think he became kind of an underrated player in Chicago because his numbers were actually not bad, right? But it's just it's expectations, right? Obviously the contract isn't very good. Same thing that I talked about with like Darnell Nurse, right? Where he's overpaid. He's not bad. And that's where I am with Seth Jones. That's where I've always really been with Seth Jones, that he's just like, he was overrated for a bit, and then he was overpaid. And, he was never a bad defenseman. He just wasn't, a top 20 defenseman in his prime. And he's not a top pair defenseman now, and he doesn't have to be in Chicago, in Florida, right? Like they used them exceptionally well in the playoffs last year. He did play a ton of minutes, but he played them in specific situations, right? Like he was never put in a situation where he wasn't going to be able to, he wasn't going to be able to play to his strengths, right? Like Paul Maurice did a good job, like quote unquote, sheltering him while playing him still like as a quote unquote first pair defenseman. And I think that is going to continue this year. This blue line is, like I said, it's better going into this season than it was last. So I don't really have much of a concern there with Seth Jones. Aaron Ekblad is the one person that I could see taking kind of a decline here, right? He's been declining for the last couple of years, but they've been able to shelter that with the other players on the blue line. I think that somebody like Jeff Petrie is going to have a good season. I don't know if it's going to be as good as what Nate Schmidt did last year. And the rest of the blue line is fine, but it's going to be hard to shelter Aaron Ekblad in a way that's going to preserve him for the entire regular season. It's unfortunate because most of this is just injury related, but Aaron Ekblad's numbers have been declining year over year. And I don't necessarily think that re-signing him was the best decision. I think it was a decision that they made because they feel like Aaron Ekblad should retire a Florida Panther. He was here for a lot of the hard times for this team, and then now he gets to kind of reap the benefits of that, and it's great. It's a great story, but it was hard for me to get behind the contract because his numbers just haven't been very good the last couple of years, and he's got the health issues, right? So for me, the Ekblad contract is just like, it's fine. He's a decent, like, if he's your kind of number 3 defenseman, it's fine. I think, again, like, you have guys like Nico Mikkola who can help shelter him. You have Gustav Forsling who can help shelter him. So, like, the partners are there. I just think that they could have spent that money in a more actionable way to kind of improve the longevity of this team. But I get it. I can't really, like, I'm not ripping them for the contract. I think it might have been time to move on from Aaron Ekblad. I think that if Kelly McCrimmon was the GM of the Florida Panthers, Aaron Ekblad wouldn't be on the team. But that's a whole nother discussion there. The point, like, Ekblad's still good as a number 3, but like, he's not the top guy on this team, and he hasn't been for the last couple of years. Nico Mikkola is such an interesting one, right? And it's like, and he's been improving. He's been improving year over year now. Which is great, right? He's 20 years old. He's still in the prime of his career. Here's the thing with Nico Mikkola, right? The Panthers found this diamond in the rough player that had very little value, and they brought him into their team, very similar to what they did with, Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Nate Schmidt and now Jeff Petrie, maybe. And they brought him into the team, and they turned him into a top 4 defenseman. Right, an elite defensive top 4 defenseman who has a bit of offensive upside. That's great, right? You believed in your scouts and your staff to go out and find this player and bring him into your team and get surplus value out of him. But then you didn't trust your scouts enough to be able to do it again. Right? Like, Nico Mikkola he's not a irreplaceable player. Right? There's players with Nico Mikkola's build every single year that just need to be, like, grown into it. Now, I understand you pay the extra because then you don't have to regrow him. Like, I get that, right? But when you're a team that's this tight to the cap and also this established and this locked in, it's going to be easy to bring players in, right? And you have the system that's so cohesive now that, like, interchanging those smaller parts won't be that hard to do. And I feel like this is the perfect opportunity for this team to just let Nico Mikkola go, trade him, get something back, and then just go out maybe in that trade and find his replacement. Find somebody with the similar build, similar type player. Even in free agency, there's plenty of players every single year, right? You could, like, I feel like this was an unnecessary signing to make. And it really, it surprised me because you trusted in your scouts to bring Nico Mikkola in and have him play such a big role for the team, but you don't trust him to do it again. And you pay a premium to keep him around. And it's just, this is what, and I don't, the Lightning were different because Tampa Bay didn't re-sign Blake Coleman, mostly because they couldn't, but like, Blake Coleman's a good example of this, right? Like, they found Blake Coleman before he was the superstar that he became in Tampa Bay. And then they let him go, and he signed a bigger deal in Calgary, and he's been good in Calgary, but he's not been, he hasn't brought a ton of surplus value in terms of his cap hit. Nico Mikkola is kind of the perfect example of that defensively, where it's like they brought this guy in, he had a ton of surplus value based on his cap hit. That's the kind of guy you let go and you find another one. and I understand that, like, it's easier to keep the guy that you have than buy a lottery ticket to find somebody else, but I trust in the Panthers' scouting ability. They certainly did when they got Nico Mikkola. They certainly have with Nate Schmidt and now Jeff Petrie. I don't know why they couldn't just do that again. It seemed like a contract that didn't need to be signed. I get why they did it, but I would have liked them to just, especially a team that needs money, it seemed like a good place to just kind of shed some cap and go find another guy. And maybe you bring in 2 guys and one of them works out for the same. Like, I don't know. I feel like it was an unnecessary contract to hand out. It's not a bad contract, but I feel like they could have believed in their scouting a bit more. Speaking of guys that they believed in their scouting, with Jeff Petrie, who's been abysmal the last couple of years, but I believe that he'll turn it around because this Panther system has turned players with similar body types of Jeff Petrie back into really strong defensemen. Like that's what they've kind of done with this sixth defenseman spot. So I think it was a very low risk move. I think there's still a ton of offensive upside in what Jeff Petrie is. He is 37 going on 38. It's an old player. So he probably doesn't get the next contract somewhere else. But if he works out, great. If he doesn't, you paid nothing to get him, and you can easily find another, third pair, sixth defenseman somewhere else. I like that gamble. I think that it will work out. And I have pretty big faith that Jeff Petrie is going to have a nice bounce back season. I don't think he turns into like a top 4 defenseman for this team or anything, but I think that there's enough. Like he'll be sheltered enough behind this blue line to be a nice, little offensive defenseman on the third line that can bring some extra value, especially come like playoff time. I finally got the goalies here, and I feel bad for Tarasov because he's the only player on this whole thing that didn't get a picture of the Stanley Cup because he wasn't on the team last year. But so he kind of stands out a little bit there. But obviously Sergei Bobrovsky's here. Sergei Bobrovsky is looking for a new contract. Bobrovsky is a very good goaltender. The Stanley Cup runs inflate what he is as a goalie. I mean, the teams in front of him have been very good. I think that the Panthers probably win both cups with a slightly lesser goalie anyway, but Bobrovsky's really good. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of where I'd rank him in terms of goaltenders because he'd probably be lower than some people would, but in terms of what he's still a top tier goalie in the NHL, obviously. But let's also not forget that 3 years ago he was the third string goalie on the Florida Panthers going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. So I don't expect him to kind of fall back to earth. But in terms of his regular season numbers, they kind of been okay. He's had hits and misses throughout that run. The good news for the Florida Panthers is you're going to get out of the $10 million contract at the end of the season, and I highly doubt that a 37-year-old goalie at that point is going to sign another $10 million contract with you. So you're probably going to get Sergei Bobrovsky for a nice discount for the end of his career, and I don't see any reason why he would want to leave and go somewhere else at that point. In his age bracket, it seems like retiring in Florida on a really good team is a good thing to do. It's very much what the Panthers were doing for a while, where they just sign all the old players to nice deals and let them retire in Florida. Bobrovsky can do that same thing, but he can do it on a team that can contend for a Stanley Cup every season. So I think a $5-6 million deal is kind of where I expect that number to be. He might get a little bit more. He might get closer to 6-7. Just if that's like the Stanley Cup tax that he'll pay. But overall, like he'll be cheaper than $10 million at the end of the season. And as the number one goalie that has just won back-to-back Stanley Cups and went to 3 straight, that's really good value. I don't think they can really complain about the Bobrovsky contract, which has actually aged pretty well. It didn't look very good at the start, right? It was the first couple of years, it was really rough, but now it's aged pretty well for them. So I'm not super concerned about him as a starter, although I think that his overall value around the league has inflated a little bit higher than I would have it, just based on the fact that he has had the team success that he has had. Again, the special teams unit, Barkov is listed on both of these. And you can kind of see how that will affect. The reason why I left him on here is because I wanted to kind of emphasize what his loss will have on this team, right? Like, it's tough to. Like, I think the power play will still be fine. I think there's enough guys on the power play that they can boost up what the power play is going to be, right? I think you could slot. Like, hell, you could run Sam Reinhart as your number one center on the power play. Like, it doesn't really matter. The power play is going to be fine. The penalty kill is kind of where I do worry a little bit. Anton Lundell is still a very good penalty killer. As that number, like, he can be the number one guy there. Etulis Turin still really good. Seth Jones is still really good there. Reinhardt, Ekblad, and Mikkola are all really good penalty killers too. So I do think that there'll be a bit of a drop off in terms of what the penalty kill looks like, but I don't think it'll be substantial. And same with the power play. Like, I don't think that the Barkov loss will be this monumental thing. I think not having Barkov and Tkachuk on the power play is going to hurt them for the first third of the season. But I don't think that Barkov's loss will be felt as much in terms of the special teams as it will 5-on-5. I think it'll be significant 5-on-5. I think in terms of their, especially the penalty kill, they have a ton of guys who can kind of fill that role and still be a really good unit. Now, it's not going to be, I don't think it'll be one of the best units in the league, but it'll still be like a decent unit overall. All right, and that is all I have for you. That is the end of this series. Thank you so much for watching. If you watch every single episode in the series, thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. This was a lot of work to put together, but it's also a lot of work to watch this much film and this much like even for you watching all these videos. This is 32 hours basically of content. So thank you for that. If you've liked what I've put together and you want to see more, I plan on putting out videos all the time during the regular season on different things, and also on Instagram at MBI Hockey there. So you can find those links in the description down below. Obviously, on the YouTube already. And all these videos are also available on audio form as well, which are also, if you just go to Apple or Spotify, look up MBI Hockey, you can listen to them there. If you don't want to have the video playing on YouTube. But thank you so much for following this entire series. This was a ton of work to put together, but I appreciate it, and it's been so much fun to do and to interact with everybody in the comments and talk to all of you guys. So if you're new here, you didn't know who I was before the series, thank you for joining. If you did, thank you for being a fan and following along. And I hope for a great regular season. The regular season should start. It starts tomorrow, and I couldn't be more excited. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next video.